great mobility. The fact he did miss some playing time, had an average hula bowl performance, I think that all contributed to it. But if he could develop his punting skills, he could be a Tom Tupa. Third quarterback and your punter save your roster spot. So what Scott's got to do is work diligently to become a much better punter.
Tupa moved to New England this year, right, in free agency from franchise formerly known as Cleveland. Here's Chris Fowler in ESPN's headquarters studios. That would be Bristol, right?
It still is Bristol, Mike. Yeah, they haven't changed since you left town. Mike Godfrey joins me. You had Scott Milanovic in Hawaii at the Hula Bowl. You also did the Thursday night game that Mike referred to when he came back and the team and the offense really struggled. He struggled and his stock began to plummet. But what did you see in Hawaii that might give an indication he might have some success somewhere down the line in the NFL?
Well, first of all, you got to realize he's a run-and-shoot quarterback, so it's a little different style that everybody's looking at on film. But Mel mentioned the punting ability that he does bring to the table like Tom Tupa does. I thought he had a pretty good Hula Bowl game. He was accurate, maybe overstrides a little bit, pretty good arm, and not a bad quarterback. I think somebody will take him here in the 7th round.
And another quarterback, John Stark, also at the Hula Bowl. Interesting situation. Here's a guy who was at Florida State, competed with Danny Cannell for the starting job. Many believe just lost that starting job by a whisker, ended up transferring to Trinity. He had come from Liberty, so he couldn't transfer to another NCAA school, had to go to NAIA and really play low-level competition at Trinity. But it's funny how careers work out. If maybe not for the fact that he wasn't from Florida and Danny Cannell was, he might have got that starting job at Florida State, could have been just as productive as Cannell was in that offense. Instead, he's now having to fight his way into this draft from an NAIA school.
Well, you know, he used to come into the ball games late in that second quarter in the second team, and he played very well for Florida State. We've got some tape on him playing at Florida State, but he has a strong arm, and he's an accurate quarterback. Let's take a look at John Stark.
Here he is back with the Seminoles.
It's a game where he's going to throw the deep route in the corner. He's got a pretty good arm. I mean, the times that this he underthrew a little bit, but it still results good, a touchdown. Here in the Hula Bowl. He's going to hit Marvin Harrison on a curl route, so he's got good zip on the ball right here. The next play I really like. It's at Trinity. He avoids a sack. He comes out, and now you can see a little bit of the gun here on the comeback route to the sideline. So John Stark, really, I tell you, I think somebody will pick him up too, because even though he played at Trinity last year, which there's nothing wrong with that, because he got a lot of experience. He played at Florida State, did well in the Hula Bowl. He's got a gun. He's accurate. Somebody will take a shot on him.
They'll have to do it based on the workouts, though, because it's tough to tell from that level of competition. Now down in Miami, as Chris Mortensen has a guy whose job it is to make quarterbacks' life miserable. Mort?
That's right, Chris. I'm here with Daryl Gardner, Baylor defensive lineman. One of the controversial picks in this draft. Believe it or not, this is his first visit to the Dolphins complex, which means Jimmy Johnson obviously was surprised to see you there sitting at 20, and you met Jimmy for the first time. What was it like when you walked into the war room?
Well, it was real interesting. You know, I didn't expect anything to be in there. You know, I just expected him to just show me around. Next thing you know, I'm looking at all the coaches in the face and some of the trainers and some of the scouts. And it was just interesting, just looking at a defensive genius such as Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, when you meet a Jimmy Johnson, you realize it's a bit of a legend, a legacy, and a guy who likes to motivate players. What was your response inwardly yesterday when you realized he was going to be your coach?
Well, I just said thank you. You know, I said thank you, and my parents said thank you, and you know, we were just ready to go in, and I'm prepared to come to Miami and work.
Daryl, one of the most unkindest criticisms of a player is that his motor doesn't run all the time, or that he's an underachiever. That label was put on you. It was said to be the reason you slipped. How do you respond to that?
All I can say is, that stuff happened in the past. I can't do anything about it. I've done everything I possibly could do to erase the inconsistency. But when I put on them pads and go out there and work, and they see me working, everybody in Miami sees me working, they're going to realize, hey, this guy, they passed up a great player, and I'm trying to get to that goal.
Defensive end or defensive tackle, which do you prefer?
I have the speed to play in, and I have the quickness and agility and speed also to play tackle. So I don't know.
And full of confidence. But you're not alone here. Baylor linebacker LaCurtis Jones was picked in the 4th round. Give us a scouting report on LaCurtis Jones.
LaCurtis Jones I say he's the guy who has the biggest heart in college football. He's also the best player in college football. People may say, well, if he's the best player, why didn't he get picked first? His size is knocking against him, but he is the best player in college, and he's a guy that I don't see how a coach passed up on. The guy makes plays, period, and he's just a hard worker, and his motor stays running, and after the game, they're not going to be able to shut him off because he's always trying to get that energy going. He's a guy you'll love to play with, and you'll like a lot.
Well, 19 teams passed on Daryl Gardner. He's a Miami Dolphins now. Now let's go to Chris Myers in Dallas.
All right, thank you very much, Chris. The Dallas Cowboys just made their selection here in the 6th round. They'll have one more draft choice to make. A special teams player, defensive back, primarily a cornerback, Wendell Davis out of Oklahoma. This was the scene in the war room moments ago when the Cowboys made the selection. He's a speed player, good speed, 4.4 40, and will help out in the secondary. One of the concerns there, Brock Marion, of course, stepped in as the Cowboys were riddled through free agency and players leaving. He will be a free agent after this season. Dallas, prior to the draft, if you recall, traded with Atlanta to acquire Roger Harper, who can also help in the secondary, and that's something they hope that Wendell Davis can do as well. That's it. Here from Dallas, as the Cowboys continue to stock up on reserves and players that down the road will help out. We'll go now to Mike Tirico in New York.
Time to loosen the tie for Jerry and company. A long couple of days and the days preceding, leading up to the draft, winding down to a close as we're down to the final pick of round 6 here in the NFL draft. You know, Dallas re-signed Jason Garrett, their third-string quarterback, so they are comfortable in the quarterback spot. Here are the other teams that have thus far decided, 6 teams, to go out and pick a quarterback in the draft. Nobody took one early. Take a quarterback early, it's a big risk.
Polaroid presents the NFL Draft Snapshot.
When Andre Ware played at the University of Houston, he broke 26 NCAA records and capped his junior year by winning the Heisman Trophy and then decided to go pro.
The Detroit Lions select Andre Ware, quarterback, Houston.
Yes,
New England is up next.
Yes, baby.
The 7th pick in the draft spent most of his time on the sideline, starting only 6 games in 4 years with a 3-3 record before being released by the Lions. He was out of football in '94 after being cut by the Vikings. And he failed to make the Jaguars roster in 1995.
Let's check out the last 6 selections here in the draft to conclude round 6. Marco Rivera becomes the 9th Penn State player selected. That's more than any other school. And again, Florida State and Colorado had 10 selections in last year's draft. And there you see Seattle taking T.J. Cunningham, a former Buff who is now going to move a little bit to the west. Apparently he'll be moving northwest, not southwest, if the reports hold up. And there was a press conference last night in Seattle that indicates that the money from Paul Allen, the computer but has been involved in the conversations related to this story over the last few days. Mort, what is the live coverage of the draft rolls on? We are 1 pick through round 7, where you find some familiar names in the past. Finding a quarterback late in the business. Joe Theismann in 1971 was a 4th-round selection. It's worked out pretty well for everyone involved. The Redskins and us, after, of course, Joe's trip, as you were reminded there in front of you, Miami, the team that drafted Joe Theismann. There are others who, as you move down, were drafted, but then you start to notice the guys in the late 80s and then the 90s, many of them are nowhere near the team that drafted with them. Just look at the Washington situation with Rippon and Humphreys, and you wonder if Washington's going to be in the same situation that they were then with Gus Frerotte now, and of course Heath Schuler, as those guys will battle out for the quarterback job this coming year. And John Freese in San Diego removed from that situation. Let's talk a little bit about quarterbacks and in general, Tampa Bay. If you're going to have a great quarterback like a guy like Trent Dilfer, who the Buccaneers brought in a 1st-round pick, their prerogative is, yeah, you got to get Trent Dilfer in the lineup at some point, but then you have to balance that out with winning. Trent Dilfer could be successful for you as a football team, but you've got to turn to winning and have that investment there, because if you don't win, you're not going to put people in the stadiums, and that's a totally separate issue that we should bring up here with Tampa Bay as Andrea Kramer joins us. Andrea, the Tampa Bay situation is one that was very dicey for a while, possibly moving to Orlando, somewhere else in Central Florida. Why don't you update us on where that situation is?
Well, Mike, you said the key word, stadium, and isn't that really what stadium economics is the hot issue in the NFL right now? Let me try to update you on what the situation is. I just got a chance to speak with Joel Glazer, one of the owners. The Bucs will play here next year, no question about that. but the Glazers covet a new stadium. They say they're losing between $12 and $15 million a year. Here's a synopsis of what's been going on. The Glazers, the city of Tampa, and Hillsborough